Marshall, the meter reader, comes through in the clutch. The Hawkeyes win another Hawkeye-esque game, this time in Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, 13-10. These scores are getting easier and easier to predict. As crazy as that sounds, Iowa consistently does this, and they are the deviation from the mean of college football in every way imaginable. They are the outlier, and they have been the outlier and continue to be the outlier week after week and year after year. We welcome in the man of the hour, or the next 2 hours, I should say. Coach Don Patterson is with me. Don, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Corey.
So before we get to, I want to ask you about Marshall Reeder. We're going to talk all about this win. I'll ask you the same question, though, I've asked you so many times before. How does Iowa do it?
Well, you won't be surprised to know I've never talked to Marshall Reeder in my life. I think I'll look him up the next chance I have.
Marshall, real quick, Marshall Meeder.
I'm sorry, Marshall Meeder. Did I say Reeder?
Just to make sure we're clear on that. He is the
Meeder.
I've coined the, maybe somebody else came up with this. I have coined him the meter reader from now on. But, Don, I mean, that's as gutsy of a call. I mean, first of all, and I tweeted this out at halftime, the decision was made at halftime to go with Marshall for the second half at place kicker. Drew Stevens had obviously struggled in the first half, had 2 kicks blocked, had an extra point blocked week prior, also missed a long field goal that's atypical for him last week. So they basically made it clear at halftime, hey, we're going with Marshall in the second half unless we have a 50-plus yarder at the end of the game. And in this case, they were able to knock off a big run from LaShawn Williams on that final drive and got Iowa within meters range, if you will. The guy has never seen the field at Iowa. I don't think he's ever been on the field, has he, Don? Have I missed him?
Not to my knowledge.
And he did not handle kick. He was not expected to handle kickoffs in the second half. He did not. Drew Stevens had the only kickoff in the second half, which did go out of bounds. We'll talk about Drew's struggles here in a little bit.
The second kickoff to go out of bounds, too.
Second of the day to go out of bounds. So we'll talk about Drew Stevens and where his head might be right now in a little bit. But again, Iowa with the 13-10 win. And Don, I want to jump to this right away. We could have went a lot of different directions with our RTI Threads player of the game. I just have such a hard time not going with a young man like this. I mean, I just cannot imagine being put in that situation last game of the season, game on the line. He's never played at Iowa. By the way, his numbers at Central Michigan last year were not the best. And so I think it's part of the reason why he moved on. But Kirk Ferentz said after the game on his CBS interview that he's been practicing really well. And that kick didn't have a whole lot of distance, Don. But it did go
barely cleared the upright.
So just talk about, have you ever
crossbar? I'm sorry.
I know I recall a story you always tell about a guy named Mike Cypress who was a punter but came in for a long game-winning kick in a big game. But have you ever been in a situation like this as a coach where you had to put in a guy who's never seen the field on your football team in a moment this big?
I lost you, Corey.
Don, have you ever been in a situation where you've had to put a kicker on the field in this situation who's never seen the field on your football team? Has that ever happened with you as a coach?
Mike had certainly seen the field, of course, because he was an all-star, all-conference punter, I should say. And he had also kicked really well in practice. It was kind of an interesting situation because our starting kicker Mike was a punter and not a kicker. Most coaches would certainly prefer to not have one player do both. But Joe Lopez, our kicker, had been ill for a few days with the flu, and Mike had kicked really well in practice. And so when Joe struggled in the Unidome against Northern Iowa, I said, Mike, you're our guy. He warmed up with a couple of PATs, and then he went on the field and kicked a 56-yard field goal to win the game. So a little longer kick than the one we saw today. But still, what this young man was able to accomplish today is very impressive, because it's more of a movie script than it would be a recount of a typical college football game.
I had a hard time as I was getting prepped for this show. I kept coming back to the moment and the fact that this kid's never been on the field at Iowa. So he is our RTI Threads player of the game. By the way, I've got my RTI Threads Cooper DeJean sweatshirt on again. By the way, I think if Cooper DeJean had been playing in this game, Don, I know Iowa plays in a lot of close games regardless. I don't think this game would have been this close. Not that Iowa would have scored a bunch more points. I don't know that Nebraska would have scored because, frankly, the busted play on the super explosive in that first half, I don't think would have happened had Cooper DeJean been in the game. Well, we don't know that, but that's just kind of what I presume. I would also, you got to give an honorable shout out to LeSean Williams. He has been kind of under the radar all year, just really solid. And line play hasn't always been the best, but today, 16 carries, a buck 11 net yards. It did have the 53-yard run, but boy, a big breakaway run there at the end, almost broke loose for the touchdown, set up the game-winning field goal. How good has he been in spite of up and down offensive line play?
Well, you have to give him credit for being the most reliable of all three backs. And you've heard me brag on all three of them. I'm glad we have all three. I have no problem with us playing all three. But if I had to pick one that's played better than the other two, it would have to be LeSean.
We did see Caleb Johnson start today. He was the first guy out in the field.
Right.
Maybe a little bit of a reward for his heroics last week.
I'm sure.
And that's fine. But you're right about LeSean being the bell cow and the most consistent back for Iowa. And I also thought about just naming Ethan Herkett the player of the game because, he doesn't grab that interception. We may not even see overtime. It's possible we don't even see overtime, Don.
You're right.
But that's the type of play that, again, not saying it was Phil Parker's best day in the world. I'm sure he's going to be looking back at that super explosive and kicking himself all week for that, even though they held this team to 10 points. But his guys seem to always make big plays in big moments, whether it's a defensive lineman getting up for a pick or a cornerback making a pick or a strip sack, whatever the case may be. I recall just a few years ago, Zach Van Valkenburg with kind of a weird fumble/interception on a weird play near the line late in the game that ended up helping Iowa seal the deal in that one. And how many game-winning kicks are we going to see in this series? Whether we're talking Miguel Racinos, Caleb Shudak, Keith Duncan, and now Marshall Meter. And by the way, I'll say this too. I think Drew Stevens will be back. I know people were kind of ripping me during the game for coming to his defense a little bit. He is struggling right now. There's no question about it. But that kid's got good character, and I think he'll be back. This has got to be a low point for him. But I wouldn't be surprised if they play Nebraska next year and he kicks a game winner to make it 5 different kickers in the last 7 years to win this game.
Well, the immediate question as it pertains to place kicking is who's going to go out for a game-winning kick next weekend in Indianapolis.
Well, like I've said before, I think Drew is the best kicker on the roster. I don't think it's even close. You look at what he did last year. He just hit a game winner a few weeks ago. What would you attribute his struggles to today? I mean, I know you're not talking to Drew. There was a comment here in the chat from OS for Hawks. He says, my buddy texted me, said Drew Stevens might have a toe issue. That is not true. And I understand you're just repeating a rumor. I can tell you that is not the case. He's not dealing with a toe issue. That is not the root of the problem here. But Don, tell us what your thoughts are on the Drew Stevens struggles, because we've not seen him struggle like we have in these last couple of weeks.
Well, I don't mind sharing with the listening audience the conversation we had at halftime. You asked me a question, and you just wanted my professional opinion. Who gets more blame on the blocked field goals? And I told you at the time, I said, I believe I have to assign more blame to Drew. And that may not be fair because it's hard to tell for sure where the balls were. But it looked to me like both of them had a trajectory that was a little on the low side. And here's a point to be made. First off, nowadays you don't see many edge rushers block field goals. It's always jump rushers that block field goals, inside rushers, that get some kind of push and then try to gather themselves and get a hand up. And if you're lucky, you get a piece of the ball every now and then. But to have it happen twice today, honestly, as I look back at those kicks, the ball came out a little low, I thought.
And I agree.
Yeah, and in that regard, I had to assign a little more I won't use the word blame, a little more responsibility for the blocked field goal to fall on Drew, I think, versus even our offensive line. The line gave up a little bit of a surge, I guess. Obviously, every little inch matters when you're trying to block a field goal because you just need to get a piece of the ball in so many cases. But for whatever reason, the balls came out low. Just a thought I would have. I know a lot of people would say you kick a 50-yard field goal exactly like you kick a 20-yard field goal. You drive the ball. Well, you think about it, that's a little bit silly to think that way because obviously from a 50-yard standpoint, the ball has to be a little bit lower trajectory to get there. But from the 20-yard line or even the 10-yard line, in the case of a PAT, I guess it'd be the 11-yard line because we spot the ball 8 yards. You have a chance just to undercut the ball a little more and have it leave your foot at a higher trajectory. You're not concerned about distance, obviously. You're just concerned about it being between the uprights and not being blocked. And so there is an argument for hitting a different ball on a PAT or a short field goal than you do on a longer ball.
Don, one thing that jumps out off the box score when I'm looking through the stat sheet here, 10 targets for Nico Ragaini this evening. It seems like a little bit much. I mean, I don't want to seem overly critical about a subject that we've been critical of in the opposite direction, not targeting receivers enough. But, boy, 2 catches on 10 targets, and some of those were not the best of throws from Deacon Hill, but Nico did not have his best game.
Right. You're right about that. I think they have a lot of confidence in Nico for his ability to catch, his ability to get open too. He does understand better than the younger guys how to run routes. Incidentally, that one ball that they came back and said, well, I think I'd have to count that as a drop against Nico. One reason I think Nico wasn't able to control it, I'm thinking about the slant route. Remember that one? There was a dropping defensive lineman again that didn't get a piece of the ball, but got a little bit in the way of the throw. The throw had to go a little bit inside of him, which made it a little bit high, a little bit extended for Nico. And I think that defender was a little bit in the line of sight as Nico was running his route, So I think that was a little bit of an issue, is that Nico didn't pick the ball up quite as quickly. Nico might simply say, I dropped it. It's that simple. But it looked to me like a difficult chance. I know Lisa asked me, she said, how do you explain some of these drops? And I said, well, you got to realize your hands lose a little bit of sensitivity when they get cold. I think you asked me at halftime, you said, what about the drop in the end zone by Caleb? And I said, well, he tried to body catch it. He didn't try to catch it with his hands. And you asked why. And I said, well, maybe he felt like he lost a little feeling in his fingers. Didn't have a lot of confidence he could catch it, of course, with his hands. Hence, he tries to body catch it and the ball goes through. I don't think Deacon could have thrown it much better. Location was perfect. I guess a better opportunity would have been the same location with a little less velocity. But let's face it, down there, you heard me say, if you're going to throw to the front pylon, you better not throw it late, right? So in that regard, the ball's got to be thrown with a lot of velocity, and it was. But it was a good throw. Should have been caught, obviously.
All right. A couple things here. First of all, I have to acknowledge this. I think it's funny. Now, Bob, appreciate you being here. But when you say I never did agree with Corey on Stevens, I love the opportunists out there that jump on a narrative because it's convenient. Drew Stevens, once again, I'll remind everybody, was 24 of 24 on extra points last year and 16 of 18 on field goals. So, just because you don't have a platform and you're not making your voice heard doesn't mean you called it all the way along. And by the way, Drew Stevens, this is not the last we've seen of Drew Stevens. The kid will be back, and he's having a rough time right now. Regardless, I can tell you, I was told on a pretty good authority, pretty good source, that Drew is dealing with a bit of a groin issue that perhaps sprung up during this past week. Now, that doesn't necessarily explain the low kick against Illinois last week, but I can tell you that during practice, there was a little bit of a groin issue that came up against Drew Stevens this week. That again, not making excuses for the low kicks. I don't know what to attribute that to, but that is out there as well. Let's get to our super chats. Lemansky, first of all, says, cold day, good punting. Torrey handled a bad snap at the winning field goal. Love Torrey Taylor. That's maybe the area of his game that we don't talk about enough, Don. He only averaged 42.4 on 7 punts today in a long of 49. Windy day and obviously very cold. 2 punts inside the 20 without his gunner, Cooper DeJean, and he's the guy who was responsible on that last hold. So give Torrey Taylor credit. We're going to miss him. Appreciate the super chat, Lemansky. And he adds with this super chat, Coach Don, the switching kickers at the end, guessing LeVar Woods had to bless or make that decision.
That's a good question. I'd like to know the answer to that myself.
I can tell you the answer. I can tell you the answer, Don, if you'd like to know. That was a Kirk decision.
Okay. It was a Kirk decision, I'm sure. But the question I would have, did Kirk check with LeVar for his recommendation? Ultimately, it's a Kirk decision. I would like to know if it's LeVar and if LeVar recommended making the change.
And I do know that, again, Kirk said after the game during his post-game interview that Marshall has been really good in practice. So that's a good sign. Cinnamon Sugar, appreciate the super chat here as well. Thank you for the donation. And Eric, thank you for your donation. He says this game is quintessential reason why Brian is losing his job. Defense bailed out the team plus Nebraska's stupidity at the end. Jeff says one of the worst coaching jobs I've seen on both sides of the ball. Well, you can look at it that way, Jeff. You can also argue it's one of the best head coaching jobs that you've ever seen, because how a head coach leads a team in a Power 5 conference to 10-2. Yes, it's not a good division, but 10-2 in one-score games after injury, after injury, after injury, after injury, and an inept offense is pretty incredible. And I don't think Phil Parker maybe coached his best game today, and we can talk about maybe why that is, but I don't agree with that take. Can you talk a little bit about the explosive play? We don't normally see Iowa give up big plays. What happened on the big touchdown catch in the first half for Nebraska?
Yeah, and I don't mind sharing with the viewing audience again, Corey. We discussed that at halftime too. The comment I made, I was upset at the time because I was pretty sure even that Phil Parker would have said, that's on me. I think that's probably what he would have said. For this reason, it was third and extra long, I think, wasn't it? Let me see.
It's third and 11.
Third and 11 on the minus 34. Iowa fakes free safety blitz. We had both safeties acting as if they might be rushing. The only problem with that is they didn't come, but all they did was peel off to combo on the inside receivers on both sides. I believe it was empty, as I recall. I think it was 3-by-2 because the one that peeled off on the trip side comboed on number 3 receiver, which left Deshaun Lee man-to-man on number 2. Deshaun got beaten badly to the post. Nice throw. Great execution on their part. But I'm pretty sure that Phil Parker would have said, that was a bonehead play on my part. I'm suspecting he would say that. Because why are we trying to get cute on 3rd and 11? I don't mind faking a blitz even, but you got to get back into coverage so that you have your usual help over the top, and we didn't have that.
Okay, let's see. Comment here, super chat from Leon. Leon says, if we can switch kickers mid-game, why can't we switch quarterbacks? Well,
good question, Leon.
It's a fair question, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with the question.
There was a period of time there where I thought we might see our next quarterback because one of those hits, Deacon, I'm sure felt. You remember the play I'm talking about? I bet they commented he might be injured. But to his credit, he kept playing. So we were lucky that it wasn't a more serious injury.
We're going to get to our call-in line, our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line in just a second. Again, thank you, Leon, for the super chat. Before we get to our first caller, do want to take a moment to thank Iowa Smokehouse, not only for sponsoring the call-in line, but for sponsoring the show throughout the year. If you're new to the show, a big part of the reason why we're here is because of our sponsors. IowaSmokehouse.com. Use the code Hawkeyes for great snacks, whether it be their meat sticks, their jerky, maybe even their salsas or barbecue sauces and ketchups. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. So much sports going on. By the way, we'll be here for the next 2 hours because we've got Iowa hoops, men's and women's hoops here later today. And Iowa Smokehouse will be with us for that post-game show as well. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off at iowasmokehouse.com. Also, Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. He's been with us throughout the football season. Give him a call at 515-256-6480. And maybe even on Cyber Monday, give Brad and his team a call to see how they can save you some money on auto insurance, boat insurance, renter's insurance, whatever the case may be. Visit him online at bradvanmeter.com. Also want to thank RTI Threads. I talked about our RTI Threads player of the game. But yes, RTI Threads has been with us throughout the year. And in spite of the injury to Cooper DeJean, I got to give a shout out to another RTI Threads athlete. Carson Shire had a couple of big games today, or big plays today, Don, one of which coming on a big tackle on punt coverage. And yep. I believe, am I correct in saying he had the fumble recovery?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Let me pull this up here. We'll get to that in a second. But a couple big plays for Carson, who is probably going to be called on next year, especially, just depending on who leaves, who comes back. They're really senior laden in that linebacker room, and Carson's dealt with some injuries, appears to be healthy now. So, again, just thank you to RTI Threads for being a part of this show throughout the season. And if you're new to the show, you can support all our sponsors. All of their links are in the description below. But you can shop Cooper DeJean's merch line, his apparel line at cd3lacesup.com. Or Aaron Graves, Carson Shire, Aiden Hall, Zach Lutmer, all their merch at rtithreads.com, and more in the hopper. More Hawkeye merch in the hopper, courtesy of RTI Threads in Western Iowa. Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We'll start with James on hold for a long, long time. James, welcome.
How you doing?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing better now that we won, but first off, my point I was going to make was the same thing as him. I didn't understand why he blitzed on why Phil blitzed on 3rd and 11. Because I feel like the rush at that point was getting to him perfectly fine anyways. We were frustrating them. I don't understand why we went to that. Like, especially that kind of blitz where he brought the safeties down and then it put them out of position to try to get back.
He didn't blitz. He faked
the blitz. Yeah, but I'm saying, like, he brought him down to fake the blitz.
Right.
So then he put him out of position because he brought him down to fake the blitz when our 4 rushers were not getting to him, like not sacking pretty, but they were frustrating him by making him get out the pocket, and then he had to make decisions from there. So it was kind of an interesting point where it's like, why you bring him down in that situation?
Aren't you just doing everything in that situation, Don, to contain any scramble on 3rd and 11? I mean, you're just hanging back. I mean, what's weird about that for a novice football mind like myself, and I think probably a lot of our Iowa fans who love the game and watch the game but rely on you for intel, you're watching this and you see, last week, I think it was against Illinois, Deshaun Lee, I think it was like 3rd and 2, and he sunk 10 yards back, and Iowa very conservative on 3rd and short. Why roll the dice on 3rd and long? I mean, I know you don't agree with the call, but what do you think the reasoning in that moment was from Phil?
Well, I think the thought process was show blitz, maybe prop them to check to a quick throw. They need 11, right? So show blitz, have them check to a quick throw. After the quick throw, tackle them short of the 11-yard gain. I think that's what he hoped to happen, but it didn't. And clearly, he thought we need to combo the inside receivers because those are the guys most likely to catch the slant route. It happened to be the ideal call in that situation. Number 2 was the guy going deep, and he was covered, of course. He was hopefully covered by Deshaun, but it didn't happen that way. Deshaun was beat to the post, and it was all over when the ball was caught.
Okay, first off, 2 more questions, and I'll let you get to the other calls because I know you got other callers, and we got a basketball game here soon. But what was your thought, Corey and Don, when Deacon threw the interception?
You want to? Well, you know my thought, James.
Yeah, they should have went to overtime, but
I tweeted out, and
Yeah.
Don, you may not agree with this, but I tweeted out, and I wouldn't normally do this. I said after, let's see, well, at first we thought Nebraska had been charged a timeout, right? It was third down.
I don't understand why I would take a timeout there. I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, hold on a second. I agree. And had Nebraska called the timeout, then it would have made the decision even easier for me. I would have said, we're taking a knee here and going to overtime. I am not putting this game in the hands of Deacon Hill. And I mean, again, I'm all for rolling the dice and, aggressive Kirk 3.0. But Don, I tweeted out right before that happened. I said, have to take a knee here. They did not. Deacon throws an interception, nearly cost them the game. Just your thought process. That seemed very much against the grain of what Kirk would normally do in that situation.
Yeah, I felt this way. We had done next to nothing in the second half, right? We had 200 yards at halftime. I doubt that we had 100 in the second half. Maybe we ended up with 100. Not much more than 100, though. You can look it up as we talk. But I honestly felt we just need to get in. We just need to get to the end of regulation with it 10-10 and then take steps to beat them in overtime. Because I thought the odds of us being able to engineer any kind of drive were very slim at that point. Truthfully, there were other times in the game we were fortunate that we didn't throw a pick or two the way the balls came out. A time or two, we were just lucky that they weren't intercepted. They certainly had some opportunities, just like we did, but it seemed like they had more opportunities. And again, I just saw it all in real time, so I'd have to go back and look to see how many balls were legitimately had a chance to be intercepted. It just looked like we were maybe not intercepted so much as just the possibility of him being stripped in the pocket.
Well, either
Hey, think about this. Twice we got stepped on, right? Twice our quarterback's foot got stepped on. That should not happen. We are so lucky that it didn't end up as a safety. I'm talking about the goal line play, of course, where he was almost down and tossed the ball back to LeSean.
Two things. Heck of a play in the moment from Deacon to toss that ball as he's falling down. All right, that's a lot of weight coming down on that turf. And he did it he did both times. Got that ball off both times. Credit to Deacon Hill. Second thing is the color commentator, I don't even know the guy's name, and he's an offensive lineman, former offensive lineman apparently, because they kept bringing it up, made the point of saying, that's always on the quarterback. Now, he's a former old lineman. Is that true, Don? Was it a trip or did his foot get stepped on?
Well, his foot clearly got stepped on, but here's the question. It still could be one or two players, and it gets down to the footwork of the lineman versus the footwork of the quarterback. I will say this. Quarterbacks need to understand that first step has got to come in a hurry. You can't leave your foot in the ground, and you got to know for sure what the appropriate footwork is. And to coincide with that, of course, the linemen, their job is not to retreat on that particular play. Their job is to, if they do retreat, only ever so slightly, because pass sets need, you need to take on it. You don't want to give a guy a chance to get ahead of steam against you on a pass set. How far off the ball do you need to set? Only long enough to get your hands up. So if the ideal offensive guard would pass set without really dropping much at all, because he could shoot his hands that quickly to take on that lineman on the line of scrimmage. Don't retreat and give him a chance to bull rush you into the quarterback's lap. You follow me there, Corey?
Absolutely.
You drop only enough to get your hands up. That's what most O-line coaches would teach. The bottom line is that the quarterback should not be stepped on. And just like what's the problem with the snap? Well, I always said it's never one person's fault. It's the fault of the quarterback and the center. I'm talking about when he's indirect. If the exchange doesn't happen, let's just analyze why. We have to solve it, and there's not going to be one person's fault. It might be one more than the other, but the bottom line, we have to solve it. We have to go an entire season without losing a snap when we're indirect. That's the goal. That's a lofty goal, but there are some teams that actually get that done. They go an entire season without losing a snap underneath the center. So the bottom line, for him to be stepped on twice, I would suspect it's more his fault than the lineman. I don't know that. Only the coaches can determine that. And they might not even know until they look at the video.
For sure. And one more thing First off, I don't know Kyle said Caleb Brown got in the game. I didn't see him back in the game, but we need him, so I hope nothing serious if he is hurt. I know he missed like most of the second half. But talking about snaps, Torrey Taylor on the kickoff. If he didn't put the snap back up the way he did, we didn't have a chance. Because if you watch, it hits the ground, he picks it back up real quick and puts it back.
You're talking about on the field goal kick?
Yeah, on the last field goal kick, he literally was on the ground. He picked it up, put it right outside.
I guess that's what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to take blame off of Drew Stevens. He is struggling, but James, you tweeted this, you texted me or DM'd me the same thing, and I wasn't trying to argue with you. But anybody that says, "Why is Drew Stevens all of a sudden sucking?" Well, there are multiple components to the kicking game, right?
Yeah.
Don, there's blocking, there's snapping, there's holding, there's kicking. So, like, I mean, yeah, it's clear he's struggling, but there might be multiple components at play here. And we just don't often see this out of any Iowa kicker, especially a guy who's been as solid as Drew has been. So whether it's mental or physical, again, I mentioned the groin issue that I was told he is dealing with this week. But in general, I think he'll be back. And
as much as I'm happy for Meter, I do kind of wish that would have been Stevens who kicked the game winner after all the turmoil he went through in that game, because I feel like that would have been cool to see as well. But I'm just glad we got the win, and Marshall Meter will always be a name I think Iowa fans remember now after this game. So,
yep.
But
Thank you.
Enjoy the night, and I'll watch this Iowa basketball game. Hopefully, we can pull one through.
Sounds good, sir. All right. Lots of comments in the chat, and if you want your comment to be addressed on the air, it's going to have to be a super chat. I can't filter through everyone's comments. D. Rolifson with the super chat. The wide receivers didn't help today. Grateful for 10-2. It is fair to acknowledge that Deontay Vines continues to be out. Caleb Brown went out in that second half with an injury. By the way, Don, you asked about total yardage in the second half. 116 total yards for the Iowa offense combined in that second half, including just 38 in the fourth quarter. But for the day, Caleb Brown did have 3 catches on 21 yards, and he looked okay at times. There was a play on I'm trying to figure out which side of the field we'd be talking about. But there was a play along the sidelines that Caleb Brown made into the red zone in that first half that looked like vintage athlete. Like this is the reason this kid was a 4-star recruit. And you see his upside, and then he has the end zone, gets hurt. I still really am high on Caleb Brown, and I think he's going to really help this team, assuming he sticks around. But he's made a lot of progress over the last few weeks. Keep in mind, he wasn't even playing like 4 weeks ago, and he's basically their number one receiver right now. I don't know what's happened with Seth Anderson. He had a big catch late in the game, but he has been playing less and less as well. Jacob Bostic saw the field today. And you're absolutely right, D. Rolifson, as far as drops are concerned. I don't have an official number yet, but Caleb Brown was targeted 5 times, caught 3. Nico had 10 targets, caught 2. Seth had 2 targets, caught 1. And Jacob Bostic had the 1 target on a bad throw. Some of those were just bad throws. That's a terrible throw, terrible decision. Also a bad route by Jacob Bostic. I don't know if you agree with that, Don, but
we were very lucky that ball wasn't intercepted.
It's a really bad route.
You're right.
It's a young man who's going to learn, but that shouldn't have been thrown anyways. Let's go back to Kyle. By the way, Kyle in the chat does say that apparently Caleb was back on the field at the very end of the game. So that's good news if that's the case. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Sean is on hold. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Hey.
Good to see you, Sean.
Hey, congrats on crushing the under once again. You guys have been paying my bills this year with these just taunting Vegas. Can you set this line low enough?
It's incredible, isn't it? And they flirted with the line today with 23, but it was they did it under. Yep.
Yeah, especially in the first half. Looked actually competent on running the ball in that first half. It was a bit surprising. Been following the show all year. Never got a chance to call in, but I just want to say I appreciate you guys do good work here covering these games. And
appreciate that.
And I watched this a little vested interest. I'm a Buckeye fan, so hopefully we'll meet up next weekend.
That'll be fun. I don't know that it'll be fun for Iowa, but it'll be fun for someone.
Well, you get a trophy anyway for it, right? For this?
Well, they get a banner. They get a banner somewhere for winning the West. They'll get a banner somewhere, and they'll get a banner for a bowl game appearance as well, Sean. So that's good.
Absolutely. So, wondering what needs to be done to modernize this offense while maintaining fidelity to Iowa's sort of holistic approach to football. I don't think they really want to be the team that's running up and down the field, risking turnovers. I think they want to play risk-averse football and offense. They'd like to be obviously more effective than they are. What?
I think I understand what you're saying, Sean. Don, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but you're basically asking, how does Kirk, moving forward, different offensive coordinator next year? I mean, we're not going to be a whole lot of wholesale changes made between now and next Saturday, but moving forward, how can Kirk Ferentz allow this offense to be evolved while still maintaining the kind of the baseline, the foundation that is this program, field control, clock management, all that stuff, Don?
Well, hire a guy that knows a lot about teaching and training quarterbacks, and of course knows a lot about formulating game plans too. Hire someone that has the capacity to require defenses to defend the entire field, the width and the depth of the field. Hire someone that has a great concept of how to teach and how to bring someone along to really play at a high level. And there's a mental side of it as well as a physical side of it. That's for sure.
And like, do you think a lot of their struggles come from them now just not threatening the whole field? Like defenses can sort of can clamp down and just play very heavy in the box, which obviously hurts your running game.
Yeah, I think we have to be a greater threat in the passing game with all eligible receivers. Right now the backs don't get the ball much at all. Tight ends get it more than average. Receivers get it less than average too. So we need a better blend of all those 5 positions catching the ball. So it makes us harder to defend. And I say 5 receivers. Of course, sometimes it might be 4 wide receivers and a back on the field. Other times it might be a couple of tight ends. So all combinations, just all 5 receivers need to be a threat in the passing game for the passing game to have more success.
Yeah, I mean, I look at a program like those Cheaters. They do a good job of kind of doing, I think, what Iowa likes to do. They use a lot of heavy personnel sets. But there's always a threat. But they get everyone involved in the passing game.
Yeah.
And teams
going to be a hard assignment, regardless if it's Michigan and Ohio State. Hard assignment, regardless, especially without Cooper DeJean, because man, Don, I don't remember, and I'll be honest, the offense didn't look a whole lot different with Cade McNamara. Now, Cade was hurt. I'd like to think that if he was healthy, it would have been a different start to the year. But my point in bringing that up is, I have not seen, in my recollection, a bigger difference made at one position, or I should say collectively throughout a game by one person's injury, as I've seen with Cooper DeJean. Even though they have won these games, whether we're talking gunning or punt returning, we had a muffed punt today by Caden Weegan. We're talking about coverage. Like, he makes such a difference in so many different areas of the game. So, John, appreciate your call, sir.
Yeah, one last thing. Big event in Iowa. The big sporting event in Iowa this weekend is taking place on Sunday. The Cy-Hawk duel on the mat. You guys have any vested interest in that?
Number 4 versus number 8, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
John's got more of a vested interest because I am not a wrestling guy per se, but I'll say this: go Hawks.
I am aware. Is it true the first time there's been a national broadcast of a wrestling meet? Regular season wrestling meet?
Yeah, it's on ESPN, the Uno here on Sunday. So great exposure for the sport, great exposure for the state of Iowa.
There you go. Sean, appreciate you, sir. We'll talk to you again. Thank you, sir. MC says, crazy how bad the West is. Well, there's probably some truth to that. Takun with the super chat. After all that's happened on and off the field, so proud to see this team with 10 wins. Thank you so much, Corey and Don, for all you've done this year. Boy, I still love the emotional Kirk. I know some people are just going to be mad at Kirk no matter what he does at this point in his career because the offense isn't good, and the whole situation with Brian. And I can see why, even if Kirk isn't leaving after this season. I mean, we've talked about the potential. Is Kirk possibly going to be walking away and retiring after this year? I still don't have a definitive answer to that question. He's been really emotional, but as he's gotten older, he's been more and more emotional. He's been emotional in almost every post game over the last couple of months, Don, especially since the Brian announcement came down. And I just think he's impressed with the resilience of this team. It is impressive. That's why I said I think he absolutely should be in the discussion for Coach of the Year in this conference. I don't know if he's, maybe he wins it. Maybe he wins it over Braun or whatever his name is over at Northwestern. Frankly, 10-2 with injuries to McNamara, Lachey, All, DeJean. Maybe he wins it, Don.
Well, let's say it this way. I hope they don't vote until after next weekend, because to win next weekend, there'd be no question who should win the award.
Very much true. Thank you, Tekun, for the super chat. John says 2 blocked field goals, more adversity, missed obvious pass interference call. Either pass interference or holding. I don't know if the ball was in the air technically there, Don, but that was a bad missed call on the shot to Ragaini. Backup kicker drills game winner. You can't make this up. 0 wins for Purdy brothers against Iowa. Just shattered the record for wins of a team averaging under 250 yards per game. 10 wins. I didn't love the CBS crew today on the call, Don, but
you saw the stat, right? The previous record?
That is incredible. The previous record for most wins for a team averaging under 250 total yards is UCF, Central Florida, with 4 wins about 15 years ago. Yeah. That is an incredible stat, and Iowa's not going to average more than 250 yards, regardless of what happens these next 2 weeks. They'd have to just go crazy, and that's just not going to happen. So it is incredible. Thank you, John, for the generous super chat. Do appreciate that. Thank you for being here. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We've got a number of callers who have been on hold for quite some time. We'll start with Scott, and we'll move forward. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm glad we won. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, so I had even a more vested interest in winning, so coworkers don't talk shit about me on Monday. But I am kicking myself because I work for a large company, and I have coworkers that I talk to all the time from Dallas, Chicago, Denver, and they keep talking about like the over/under. And I always joke, take the under, always take the under. But I've never once placed a bet because I don't bet on sports. And I'm like, man, I could have made so much money. But
you're better off, Scott. But yeah, it's and frankly, I talked with Mark Rogers about this the other day, Don. Whoever came up with, well, Vegas did, but however that's done, I don't follow it enough to really even know. Iowa was projected at 7.5 wins in the season prior to the season. What a stupid projection. And I know hindsight's 20/20, but I called it stupid when it came out. With the schedule and everything Iowa had coming back, to project them at 7.5 wins in the season, that's a dumb prediction. Dumb line.
We talked even 3 months ago that we had certainly had a good chance to be favored in 10 or 11 games.
Absolutely.
And shout out to LaShawn Williams I thought he slipped through a lot of very small holes, and particularly the very last run where he picked up, 15 yards to get within field goal range. And also, Don, you were looking at ESPN, we had a total of 259 yards. So if 200 yards, I think it was at halftime, that means we had about 60 yards in the second half. But that leads me to what I was going to ask you is, I know in the beginning of the season, we kept talking about we got to get the receivers involved. However, in the first half, it seemed like, Addison and Stelianos were moving the ball. But in the second half, we were force feeding it to, Nico had 10 targets. Yeah, I don't even think that the tight ends really even had much targets in the second half. And between the two of them, they only had 5 catches for 60 yards. So I guess it wasn't huge, but I know that Stelianos catch and run, they got us to within the 10-yard line. Of course, our red zone offense is
bad.
It's like, it almost seemed like when we got to 1st and goal at the 10-yard line, Kirk Ferentz was perfectly happy. Yeah, just running it up the middle and then kicking a field goal. And I've said this.
No, he was absolutely. He ran 3 times.
Yeah.
They ran 3 times for 1 total yard. And Don, you're going to probably tell me that was the right play because you told me that earlier in the year, something similar to that, where Iowa ran the ball in the red zone on 3rd and medium to 3rd and long. And frankly, I have no faith in the pass offense, no faith in the red zone offense. So I guess it was, but then when you're missing field goals, it really complicates things. That's how fragile this Iowa system is. It's so dependent on having an adequate kicker, a really good punter, an excellent defense. You could not win games with this offense under any other circumstances. And we saw them almost lose in spite of, with the fact that Drew Stevens was as bad as he was at times today. And they found a way to do it again. But Don, what do you think about the 3 runs? I believe that was late second half in the red zone. And I believe it finished up with a Drew Stevens blocked kick.
Yeah, let me find it here. Middle of the second half, they posted this stat. Our last 10 passes, we were 1 for 10 for 9 yards in that stretch of the game. So I'll admit, I was thinking, just trying to figure out, help me out here.
What do you need help with, Don?
Just before the second block, you're saying?
I believe it was, wasn't it, Scott, before the second block, the 3 runs?
Yeah, one of them, it was a blocked field goal. I don't know which one it was, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, the way the game was playing out, 3 points looked huge. Let's face it, they were struggling. If we took away the 166-yard play, which I'm sure Phil would say was our fault, not theirs, then they really didn't sustain any drives all day. We did a great job of controlling the first half. Halftime stats, I did write them down if they were accurate. Not even close, really.
And this is where the problem is like, again, in the Wisconsin game, we ran up the middle, we punted it. We were so willing to give it back to Wisconsin. And I'm thinking we're playing on such a razor's edge that one missed block, one blown coverage, all it takes, just one, not a series of them, just one bad play on the defense or even special teams, and Wisconsin wins. And here, they didn't sustain any drives all game, but because our offense just can't, 1st and goal at the 10-yard line, and they came 3 times, and we came away with 3 points. And then all it takes is a 70-yard touchdown pass by Nebraska off of a broken coverage, and they're right back in the game. And it just feels like our defense has to play perfect, every single snap. And our offense almost seems like our offense isn't expected to play perfect, but our defense has to, or else we lose the game. And it's kind of like we win by this. What is it saying? We win by the sword. We die by the sword. We're so willing to play those margins that, 3 times within the 10-yard line, 3 points.
Well, I will say this. I've got this much I do know. The second block field goal before the half, we had LeSean broke for 52 yards. That set us up in the red zone. We had 200 on the +6. 200 means second and goal. On the +6-yard line, we ran wide hide and threw it incomplete. Remember that play? Where the tight end, we faked play action, brought the tight end across the formation. It was well defended. That was incomplete. And then on 3rd down, that's when Caleb dropped a good throw to the front pylon. That's the second blocked field goal right before halftime. And I don't know, it must have been before the first blocked field goal then. It was in the first half, not second half, I think. You're pretty sure it's in the second half? I'm talking about the one when we ran the ball 3 times.
I was thinking that was second quarter done.
Yeah, second quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think all 3 of those, red zone. But I mean, red zone is 20 yards. I mean, we were at the 10-yard line or closer.
Yeah.
And
One thing, our red zone offense. I haven't looked at it for the entire season, but as Corey can tell you, the good red zone offenses produce touchdowns, not field goals.
Right.
And today, of course, we realize we can't even be guaranteed to make a field goal because we can't be guaranteed to not have it blocked.
Scott, I do got to move on, but I appreciate you calling, sir. And
okay.
we'll talk to you later today after basketball if you call in.
Yeah. Okay. And also mention that target from Jamari Harris. Was that a target? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and there was somebody. Scott wasn't the only one who wanted to know. I mean, Bob in the chat, he's upset about a lot of things, but he says officiating was terrible both ways. Targeting, I thought it was targeting. I thought it was targeting on Jamari Harris. I love when people, there's somebody, when I tweeted that out during the game, Don, these people that hate whenever I give an objective take that does not agree with what they want to hear. And I think the response was deleted now. But that's the definition of targeting. I mean, he lowered his helmet. He's trying to dislodge the football with his helmet. Right, Don? Am I wrong on that? Seemed very clear on replay.
Well, of course, the guy that's really at risk is the tackler there, Jamari in this case.
Sure.
He didn't even hit with the top of his head. He actually hit with the back of his head a little bit. His head was that much down toward the ground. So it's a dangerous play. You're at risk of a neck injury. And obviously, we used to always coach guys to run through contact and to have your eyes up. In other words, you're hitting with your face mask all the time, with the front of your helmet. You're never going to get flagged for that, of course, and you're not going to miss as many tackles. When you drop your head, your eyes are no longer on your target. So obviously, at that point, you might as well be blindfolded, because you really can't see where you're going.
And BJ brings up the fact that perhaps Kirk didn't want to get into a field goal contest with Nebraska. That's possible, but they were going to have to kick at least one field goal to win, regardless, because they weren't scoring a touchdown unless LeSean breaks one. But that was an interesting decision to do what they did on third down and call the timeout. Nearly cost them the game, but found a way in the end, thanks to Ethan Hurkett and that tremendous defense, along with some heroics on special teams and offense down the stretch.
I would say this. I suspected, just thinking about being okay with going to overtime, my thought would be, even though we would have reason to have lost confidence in our place kicking, I still like the chances of us scoring a touchdown starting on the plus 25 compared to the chances of them scoring a touchdown from the 25. And I give my reasoning for that to be simply, I'm comparing our defense to theirs. I like our chances for sure, shaking loose on a naked, shaking loose on a receiver screen, maybe busting a run up inside. We have a chance to do that. I just think our defense is more sound than theirs. So I like our chances of scoring from the 25 better than scoring a touchdown from the 25 better than theirs. And I'm factoring in the two defenses when I say that.
Appreciate the super chat here from Don. The play call to throw on third down late in the game with 41 seconds left looked more like Scott Frost than like Kirk Ferentz. Yeah, I was very much surprised by that decision. Appreciate the super chat, Don. And Arnie, appreciate the generous super chat. I've done this twice. Amy, it looks like an RN. I'm so sorry, Amy. Amy, thank you, Amy. Hello, Coach and Corey. Hell of a show as always. We enjoy listening to you guys. Thanks for all you do. Any updates on Caleb Brown injury? Super chat courtesy of RTI Threads, Amy and Marty. Thank you, Amy and Marty. And certainly Marty being a part of RTI Threads and supporting this show through sponsorship and through the super chat. But Caleb Brown, I don't have anything official from Iowa, and I have not received any top secret information on this, but I did see that our guy Kyle said that he was on the field late. I did not notice that, Don. Did you notice Caleb Brown back on the field at the end?
I didn't. But I didn't notice anything that resembled an injury either. I'm not sure when he might have been injured.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was a report from the CBS crew, although she did say, I think she said Caleb She said running back Caleb Brown, and it took me a minute to realize who she was talking about, but we did not see Caleb until late. We saw more of Bostic, more of Seth Anderson as the game went on. But no question, a lot of injuries that this team is dealing with and overcoming. That's a fact. Whether you like the offense, like the coaching or not, that is a fact. Appreciate that super chat, Amy. Do thank you for that. Brian says, if it is the exact game we all expected, no apologies for winning. This season will be talked about out for ages. Sure hope Cooper comes back. Boy, I hope so too, Don. And I've told people, don't shut that door. Don't shut that door.
Right.
Decent authority, do not shut that door. All right, I know a lot of people just assume he's out the door. Don't shut the door on him coming back. And boy, if he does, how good could things be next year defensively again? Certainly, he'd be probably I don't know if you make the guy a preseason Heisman guy, Don, as a cornerback and as a punt returner, but boy, he'd be as close to a non-offensive Heisman candidate as we've seen. I think if a guy like Jadeveon Clowney can be in the Heisman race, why not Cooper DeJean? He's that good.
Well, I would say this: if that's going to help us to get him back here, there wouldn't be anything wrong with mentioning to him, you know what? If you have any thoughts about trying to find a way to help your team and win an award such as the Heisman, we'll help you do it by giving you some opportunity on offense too. I realize there's always that possibility he'll be injured on offense, but there's also that same possibility he'll be injured on all those other plays he's out there for.
D. Rollifson says, I'll take 130 plus 10-2 every year, but we get a new OC. They will have a new OC. Now, we don't know who that will be. I know the name John Budmeyer has been tossed out a lot. It sounds like Iowa did contact Andy Ludwig from Utah. That's courtesy of our friends over at HawkeyeReport.com. Tom Kakert let us know that here about a week ago. So they have already been making at least contact, which you'd expect at this point. But I don't think John Budmeyer is probably near the top of your list, even though you're a big fan of the Hartlieb family. He's got good roots back in Wisconsin. He's got some FBS offensive coordinator experience, but there's got to be better candidates out there. And boy, this team, again, assuming that people like DeJean are not out the door, and it doesn't sound like he is official on his decision to leave, and you get Lachey back, maybe even like an Eric All. We don't know if Sebastian Castro will come back. He's another one with an extra year if he decides to take it. They could have a really stacked roster next year. Tougher division, or tougher conference, I should say, tougher schedule, etc. But it could still be really fun football with a lot of really good faces, familiar faces, and experienced veteran-laden team next year. Appreciate the super chat, D. Rollifson. And John, again, thank you again, John. I have to throw a shout-out to Kyler Fisher and Aaron Graves, both from the same high school, Southeast Valley, and playing big role in the defense. Love seeing it. Go Hawks. Yeah, not far from me here in Ames. Actually, we used to travel up to, I believe it was Gowrie, which is Southeast Valley, and hit the little 9-hole course up there on Fridays, Don. I'll put a plug in for them. Because they don't run this special anymore. They used to have a special, Don, on Fridays, $5 for 18 holes, or excuse me, $5 for, I believe, 9 holes, $5 for a cart. Probably the best deal you could imagine. They don't run that exact special anymore, but a nice little 9-hole course. But great routes, small town routes for a couple of guys making a big difference. And I've seen Aaron really just improve his ability to shed blocks. And that I know that was one of the topics of conversation during the broadcast today, Don, how good this defensive line is at getting off blocks and creating havoc in the backfield. Can you talk a little bit about that and what makes them so good at doing so?
Well, it all starts with them knowing how to use their hands to shed blockers. You just see them; they're always pushing up the field, but they're acting with their hands. You got to have strong hands to be a good defensive lineman. Because how else can you grab a guy and hold on to him and get him out of your way? And it all starts with being athletic, being an explosive person, understanding leverage. Oftentimes you'll see them up underneath an offensive lineman's pads. You've heard that expression, low man wins. There's a lot of truth to that. Depends on down and distance, of course. If you're in a pass rush mode, maybe you're not so concerned. I thought the analysts did a good job of recognizing one thing. I do think a lot of time we didn't play as many games up front because I think we were trying to be sure to keep Purdy in the pocket, try to contain Purdy. So you saw more of a controlled rush, more of a bull rush technique more often than just trying to beat people with speed moves. The sad part of it all, there was a time or two when we pressured with our linebackers, and they did accurately mention this. We lost contain a time or two. Joe's got to remember, if we're going to bring any kind of inside pressure, I think we might have brought a safety on this particular snap late in the game. And sure enough, Purdy got outside of the pocket, had a lot of time to throw and completed a throw on the boundary for a key first down late in the game. So his point was correct. If you're going to pressure with any kind of inside rush, you got to be sure you can contain rushers, especially on a quarterback like Purdy, who's not just a threat to throw outside the pocket, he's a threat to run outside the pocket. So try to keep him inside the pocket. Make him play from there. That's to our advantage, not his.
Thank you again, John, for the super chat. Do appreciate that. And in answer to OS for Hawks, yes, we do expect Tom Kakert here any minute. He is in Lincoln, and I'm sure getting close to finishing up with Coach Ferentz following the game. And Ralph asked the same question, was asked earlier about targeting. We kind of covered that, Don. I thought there were a couple potential targets missed earlier in the game. And I'm all for the targeting call. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I'm all for trying to figure out ways to protect these players when you have these big, heavy helmets that can be used as weapons. And, there was a lot going on in this game. I don't think it was the worst officiated game in the world. I thought, pretty typical as far as number of times you go to the review. I know that's just part of college football. It kind of disrupts play. But so do these long timeouts. So, yeah, the targeting thing, I was surprised. It's really good, obviously, that Jamari didn't get tossed, because that would have been the bigger impact, is the fact that he had been gone. And then you're talking about Deshaun Lee and who? Brendan Diaz-Fernandez, Devin Hilson, TJ Hall, Jamison Hines, somebody without a ton of experience coming in there, and then you can attack.
Yeah, somebody that's very unproven at that point.
Yep. Chad says, is Brian allowed to coach in the Big Ten Championship game? Yes, he is. He'll be there for the bowl game and the Big Ten Championship game. Viking Hawk 33, appreciate the super chat. After seeing the interview with Kirk, it's amazing how great of a person he is. Never seen a season like this. Appreciate that positive attitude, Viking Hawk. And I know people are still frustrated with the offense, but I will say this, Don, 13-10 win, and everybody thinks, I was just the most boring, the worst 10-2 team to ever play. They're boring football. We got 700 people on here watching this show, during a week where I know a lot of people are busy with family and whatnot. 700 people here between the two channels, so do appreciate everybody being here. Let's get to our next Iowa Smokehouse caller. We've only got about an hour left of the show, so we're going to speed through our callers. All of you on StreamYard, Kyle, Ryan, let's see, Alex. I know we've got Adam in the queue as well, along with Dave and Jackson. We're going to get to you. We're going to have to kind of speed callers up because we've got a lot to get to over the next hour before Iowa men's basketball tips off in an hour. Let's get to our next caller on the phone line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame here with Coach John Patterson. Who's on the line?
This is Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. The one was that towards the end of the game, where Purdy scrambled, almost got the first down. Then there was a false start, and then they went back and challenged that spot of the where he went out of bounds. So I was sure if they could have challenged that, because a play really didn't run, but they had a penalty on the next play. So I don't know.
It's a good question.
If they were able to challenge that.
Don, can you clear?
Well, I was surprised with the timing on the whole thing too, because if you're going to challenge it, it needs to be before the next snap. In this case, of course, it was a false start. The ball wasn't snapped. I guess that's the difference, is the ball wasn't actually snapped. It was second and about a yard, as I recall. And then it became 2nd and 6. And I guess their argument was, well, since the ball wasn't snapped, can't we go back and look at it? I guess you can. I didn't know that was an option either. And I was just relieved to know it wasn't a first down on that first down play. They didn't earn another first down. So it became 2nd and 6. And I guess we're glad that it did. I'm trying to think of exactly when that happened, though. Was that really, really late in the game, or a little bit earlier?
Yes, that was towards the end. I think it was still like 2 or 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I think on the next play, Nebraska caught an in route for a first down because I've got a 2nd and 6 here mentioned. The entry I had right before that 2nd and 6 play, I made this statement, Corey, and I bet it'll draw us. It'll make sense to you. I said, reminds me of Minnesota game. We have been outplayed in the second half. That's how I felt at that moment. I do not like the direction this thing's going. They've gained momentum. It reminded me so much of the Minnesota game. I was thinking, we're letting them hang around, and that's not good because if you hang around long enough, of course, you have a chance to win it at the end.
And by the way, real quick, to Ron in the chat, he says, crown contact was below the Nebraska player's shoulder. Read the rules. A player lowering his head before attacking by initiating forcible contact with the crown of the helmet is targeting. And that's what I saw Jamari Harris do on that play. It was not above the head or shoulder area, but that is targeting. So you read the rules, Ron. That's targeting. Now, the officials decided it wasn't when back on tape, but that's why I'm telling you my opinion it was targeting. Go ahead, Don.
I was going to say what CBS posted was simply a question of, did you hit him with the crown of your helmet or not? It doesn't matter whether it's above or below. So I don't know there might be a new rule applied this year that I'm not aware of. I don't know. But
well,
I'm assuming CBS knows.
My understanding, the difference in the language as it relates to targeting is if a guy lowers his head, even if he doesn't thrust, if a guy lowers his head and leads with the crown of the helmet, that is targeting regardless of where it is in the body. If a guy thrusts, even if he's not lowering his head specifically, but if he thrusts and leads with the crown of the helmet in that motion toward anything above the shoulder neck area, that's automatic targeting as well. So
right.
A little bit of difference.
What I would define as a malicious hit, right. based on him launching himself at the quarterback's head. Doesn't even have to be with his helmet. It might be with his shoulder pad.
Anything else, Brian?
Yeah, the last thing is another positive thing. I thought at first it was going to be in Nebraska's favor. If you remember, there was, I think it was a minute 22 left, and the game clock didn't start for like 10, 12 seconds. So they had that extra 10, 12 seconds where it actually helped us at the end because that was just enough for us, what happened with the interception to go down and kick that field goal. Otherwise, it would have went overtime earlier. So I don't know if you remember that when that game clock didn't start for like 10 or 12 seconds, and the announcers, made a thing about,
that's true,
of not starting.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was a botched thing by somebody, but the scoreboard operator, the official should have went back and looked at that. You would think you could still retroactively put time back on the clock like they do in basketball, Don. And frankly, let me just say one other thing about the clock, because Brian brought up officiating. I think that, and people are going to disagree with this, I think the delay of game call against Iowa in that first half was also a bad call, where Drew Stevens made the first kick. The clock hit 0, but as the clock hit 0, the snap came. And again, go back to the rules of delay of game. There is a split second in there where the clock hit 0, and the official has to actually go up and look and see that on the scoreboard and then look back down to make sure the play hasn't been snapped. I don't believe that call was made typical to how that rule is enforced. And the kick was good, so we don't know what would have changed. Had Drew Stevens made that first field goal, which he did, had the delay of game not been called, does he even get yanked, and does Meter kick the game-winning field goal? We don't know.
Probably all plays out differently. But you're right. Even in the NFL, you'll hear him comment sometimes, and it's the back judge that's responsible for seeing the clock. He's got to see the clock go to 0. Then he's got to move his eyes to the ball and see if the ball's been snapped. So Correct. You usually have the benefit of at least half a second there, I'd say.
Yeah, and Iowa did not get that half a second, in my opinion.
Here's a mystery to me. How about this one? Nebraska lines up for what apparently was going to be a 60-yard field goal attempt. What are they trying to do? Crazy on their part. It was into the wind. They had no chance of making a kick from there. And you know what happened next? They were forced to burn a timeout. They had to use one of their timeouts there before they push punted. That's the punt they did kill on the -1. And then we were lucky not to give up the safety when Deacon got stepped on.
Could they have just been trying to draw Iowa? Can you try to draw a team off sides with a field goal unit?
Sure. But I mean, who's gonna jump against a 60-yard field goal attempt? Be standing there waiting for the fake, because
going into the wind, right?
into the wind. It made no sense. I don't know what they were thinking. All I can think of is they were confused about the yard line and thought maybe a fake would actually make some sense. Made no sense from the vantage point that they were lining up for an apparent 60-yard field goal attempt into the wind with a mediocre kicker, I might add.
Yeah, and also the kicker was late running out there on the field for that too.
I can understand that, because what would make him think he was going to be sent out there for a 60-yard kick?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's fair too.
That's all. That's all I had. Just go Hawks, men and boys basketball tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for the call, Brian. Appreciate Brian calling in on our phone line. And let's see. Am I missing a super chat? We've got Viking Hawk 33. I see Brian here. TCU versus OU. 24 points was lowest score for a quarter. Am I missing something here, Don? Explain this.
OU had a ton of points. I know that. I think they had 42 before the half. I don't know what the final was.
I get to the comment. Okay, that's the other Black Friday game that was going on between a 9-2 team, or I should say, 9-2 team versus a 5-6 team. D Hollywood, appreciate the super chat from D. Coach Don and Corey, do you guys have a prediction for the Michigan-Ohio State game tomorrow? Thanks for the podcast. Well, that's a good question. I haven't given it a ton of thought, Don. I'm probably going to take Ohio State, but I've gotten burned, I think, 2 years in a row after taking Ohio State. So I'll take Ohio State in a close one.
Yeah, a lot of people would tell you that the pressure's on Ohio State simply because Michigan's playing without their coach. As you know, Ohio State's head coach has lost the last 2 years to Michigan, and that's frowned upon to lose 3 in a row to Michigan if you're at Ohio State. It'll be an interesting game, I think. I think it will be a one-score game. I expect it'll be a hard-fought game that'll be decided at the end of the game. But you never know, of course, how games might turn out. I don't know what kind of – the weather's probably going to be a suspect too, I would think. Don't know about the weather. It'd be hard for me to bet against Michigan at home. I don't know what is the point spread. I assume it's 1 or 2 points, probably a very close spread. But I just see Michigan as a little more experienced football team. I think they've got older players in general that have been through the wars. And I like the fact that their quarterback has a lot of experience versus an Ohio State quarterback that does not. So put a gun to my head, I'd favor Michigan.
Current spread, according to ESPN, is 3.5, of course, in favor of Michigan. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We're going to have to kind of go quick fire on some of these. Actually, I'm sorry. Pause the phones. Hold the phones. We've got a really important guest coming into the show. Mr. Tom Caker with the Nebraska. Hold on a second, Tom. Before you start talking, let me take a little sip of the Nebraska Tears.
I positioned myself just for you guys right behind me, as you can see. The Nebraska backdrop. Right.
Tom, I don't know if you caught it. Kirk Ferentz very emotional again during his post-game interview with CBS. Was he emotional again in the press conference?
Not really. No. He really didn't get emotional, but I did see the post-game. In fact, my sister sent me a text and said Kirk's crying on TV, and I was like, that figures. It figures. And she's like, I'm crying too, and it's just it's the emotions are that's been Kirk for a while now. Has been I affectionately dubbed him Emotional Kirk a while back, and just it's neat to see him so moved by his players and just appreciative of his players and what they are doing on the football field, because this man to man, whatever it is, they shouldn't be doing this. There's just I don't know that there's any logical reason for it. In fact, I asked Kirk after the game, I said, look, it's just, can you coach this? How do you coach the intangibles, the doing things better than everybody else and being comfortable in the uncomfortable? Because in a lot of games, tight games, it's uncomfortable for guys. And that's why you see guys sometimes spit the bit and other guys flourish in it. And why has this team flourished in these tight games? And I don't know, Coach P, you can probably answer that better than anybody.
Well, the announcers did mention over the course of the season, We had been in 5
Yeah.
tight games and won 4 out of 5. And Nebraska, on the other hand, had also been in 5 and lost 4 out of 5.
Yep.
So in those situations, of course, the fact that you've been there before, you just have a tendency to think we're going to make something good happen. With the game on the line, things are going to fall our way. That's just how you think. And if you failed in those situations, it's kind of a given that you're more likely to fail up ahead. And I think that happened again today.
And that's, it's so amazing that, when Deacon threw that interception, I think everybody went, oh no, and thought the game was probably going to end on a field goal going the other way. And then, Ethan Hurkett makes an interception and returns it a little bit. But then, Deacon shared with us something after the game that I thought was interesting, because I asked him, I go, were you kind of mentally preparing for overtime at that point before that play happened? And he said, yeah, we were. But he said the offensive line was on the sidelines and they were fired up and they were ready to go hit somebody. And that's what you saw on that counter right on that first play with LaShawn to go 22 yards. And that offensive line just came out and fired and opened up the hole. And as LaShawn does, he just ran hard and got it into position where they could kick that game-winning field goal. And how do you Marshall Meter? I mean,
I'll admit it, at that point in time, all I was really thinking was it was going to be a 55-yard kick, maybe.
Yeah,
But we had the wind at our back, so I still thought we had a chance. I didn't dream it might be much shorter.
I'm just curious. Did I mean, it doesn't take a genius to see, first half and even some struggles from Drew Stevens last week. Kirk made the choice at halftime today to go with Mitchell in the second half, or excuse me, Marshall, and I don't know the kid's name. Did he talk about that decision and just kind of when?
Yeah, he just said
was it before the halftime or at halftime?
It was at halftime. They talked about it and made the decision that they were going to go in another direction. And I found it interesting too that Drew's dad tweeted out a response, and I'm like, how does Drew's dad know? Did Drew text him at halftime and say he wasn't going to kick anymore in the game?
What did Drew's dad text or tweet?
He responded to a tweet from Chad Leistico and basically said Drew's been benched, and he would only kick if it was beyond 50 yards the rest of the game. And that's why I was wondering, if they would have got stalled out and it was 50 plus yards, would Drew Stevens have gone out there and kicked? Probably, because
I would expect
Marshall seemed like it was like 40 yards and in, he was okay, but that 38 yarder barely made it over. I mean, it was inching over. I was down there kind of parallel with the goalposts, and it was fluttering. In fact, I couldn't even tell that he was out there. I thought they announced that Drew Stevens was kicking in the stadium.
Yeah.
And I'm down on the sidelines, and I'm behind everybody, so I can't see what's going on the field itself. And we're trying to get into a position where we can even see, and the kick goes off, and I see it, and I'm literally parallel with the goalpost, and it just inched over, just it flip, and went over.
And for all those reasons, it seemed more like a movie script than it did a real football game.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know what to say about this team other than they're just a resilient bunch of guys that just continue to find ways to win. And that's a special quality. You don't see that every day in any team. And when you have it, you have it. And when you don't, you don't. And this Iowa team has it in spades. They just do.
Never say die.
Yep.
Mr. Veteran Hockey asked the same question that somebody asked earlier. How can a kicker have a bad day? Quarterback continue receptions, keep rolling with them.
Well, he only threw one.
He threw a big one, but you're right.
Yeah.
He only threw one. I thought the decision was rather curious first of all, you had the simultaneous timeouts called by Nebraska and Iowa. They end up charging Iowa with the timeout. Had Nebraska been charged with the timeout, I think it's an easy decision. You take a knee and you head to overtime. And I was still surprised, even though Iowa got the charge of timeout, left it a timeout on the board for Nebraska, still surprised that Kirk Ferentz opted to take a shot there. Were you surprised at that, Tom?
I was. I thought maybe, and and Coach, you'd probably know this as well as anybody, but I thought they would run like a little screen or something like that, to just kind of, if you pop it, you pop it. If you don't, it's low risk.
Right.
But if you
And
can
we
get
can
a
beat them in
first down or
overtime.
something, yeah, then
Yeah.
you just, I didn't think they would try and do something down the field like that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that stuck in my mind. It was 3rd and 12 on the -25. Iowa throws the interception. Very, very poor spacing between the receivers. You had a couple of receivers that were right there, almost close enough to touch hands. So we had poor spacing. That's part of our problem. The ball still shouldn't have been thrown, of course. And we're just fortunate that it didn't cost us. We really
Yeah.
are.
By the way,
one other comment.
Go
My
ahead.
immediate concern about him throwing is simply, what about a strip sack? What about a ball coming out and pick up a fumble for a touchdown, or at least they're in field goal range? That's what I was more worried about than an INT.
And the play
But
previous,
let's face it,
the play previous, it looked like Deacon might get stripped because, again, the clock seems to move a little bit slower in the pocket for Deacon, and he gets hit and he held on to it, but he's had that bugaboo of kind of coughing up the football.
And by the way, I saw something today that and Kirk went on a long rant about officiating. He's still mad about the Minnesota game. Still mad. Postgame was after the officials again. But how do you review a play after another play has technically been run? They called a offsides, false start. But then they went back and reviewed the play before to see if he made the first down. How do you do that?
Here's another thing that's kind of an odd rule.
You can't do that.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I do know this. Let's talk about red zone opportunities. Imagine you're on the 18-yard line based on your previous play. Now you're on the 18-yard line. That's in the red zone, right? But if you false start in the red zone, now you're on the 23-yard line, and officially that is not yet a red zone opportunity. So you have to actually snap the ball on or inside the 20 for it to be a red zone opportunity. Maybe the same thing applies out on the field, but you just haven't seen it though. Going back and reviewing it after there'd been, at least you could call it a stoppage of play, right? They blew the whistle because of a false start.
Yep.
So let's face it, that down's gone, or that snap's gone. I'll say it that way. They didn't snap the ball, but we blew the play dead because of the false start. So how can you go back and review it? News to me. I didn't know you could.
I didn't think you could. It just it makes no sense to me. But what are you going to do if it was ruled a first down? Then is it 1st and 15? I don't know.
Yeah.
Good point.
I don't know. I don't know how you adjudicate that, or do you just
does that eliminate the false start? Are we saying the false start never happened? Because
it did happen. It happened. Yeah. I don't know.
It's safe to say this is not our A-team crew. This is a different crew. The A-team crew incidentally should be in Ann Arbor for tomorrow's game.
Hey, so I've got some injury updates, or at least no updates really from Kirk. Asked about Caleb Brown, and he's hopeful that all those guys, Deontay, Caleb, all those guys, that Jennings Dunker, he's hopeful to have an update on Monday or Tuesday on them, but I don't know if we'll get him back or not. We'll see. But Logan Jones didn't play today. It's just, what do you expect? Everybody's going to be out. It's just, and they just keep going.
And I know I mentioned it earlier. I saw somebody in the chat bring it up. It does sound like Drew Stevens is potentially dealing with a groin injury from midweek, but I don't know that that's what caused him. And somebody brought up the follow through. I didn't notice any change with his follow through on his kicks, but he had an extra point blocked a week ago. So he's just struggling right now, and I don't know.
Do you guys remember like Chuck Knobloch or Steve Sachs in baseball? Remember those guys? Corey, you're probably too young, but they were both second basemen, and they had troubles just making easy throws from playing second base to first base. They couldn't make the throw, and you just kind of get in a mental block, and I wonder if Drew's kind of going through something like that right now, where he's just kind of got a mental block. I was watching him really closely pregame because of the wind in the stadium. I was trying to see what the wind was doing, and the one end that he was kicking at a lot, when he would kick it high, it would just kind of float and die. So he was trying to drive it more, and I wonder if that got in his head pregame, that boy, I've got to load line drive it to make it cut through this wind, because when you would kick it high and it would float a little bit, it would push it to the right. The wind would
Yeah.
push it to the right, and I wonder if he was just like a golfer trying to cut through a wind. He's just trying to hit a
I
low
think there's
line
probably
drive.
some truth to what you say. Now, the other block was on the other end of the field, though, right?
Yep, it was.
So I
Just
made the comment earlier, Tom. A lot of kickers will tell you, you hit the ball the same way, whether it's a PAT or a 55-yarder. I don't know if I can buy that. Obviously, a 55-yarder's got to be a lower trajectory. But there's a lot of argument to get the ball up quicker on PATs, of course, or chip shot field goals, because distance is never going to be the issue. The question is it between the uprights, and does it have enough elevation to not be blocked?
I will say this. Let's remember something, that Drew got here. He's a sophomore, got here a year ago, really struggled in the spring, and that was well documented, and really came on in the summer, had a tremendous year last year, did not miss an extra point. I think went 16 of 18 field goals a year ago. I expect him to be back. I still think he's the future at kicker. Like, just a couple of games he's off. Dude's got a heck of a leg, and I don't know what's going on right now. Like I say, it's unfortunate. But
every player goes through it. Every player goes through it, and Nate Kading went through it early in his career too. And you got to just fight through it and be mentally tough. And I'm sure Drew will manage this, and he might be dealing with some stuff, but I'm more concerned that he's texting his dad at halftime. You can't be doing that. You can't do that.
I don't think he was, because that was out there prior to that tweet from his dad. But I believe there was some communication between Drew's party on the field with Drew out of halftime. So I don't think anybody's texting, but
it was wild to me that his dad knew what was going on, and he was right about what was going on. But I was just like, oh man, that's not a good look.
Yeah, and I know Drew's got a camp there every game in each road and at home. Tom, anything else that we missed from Kirk's presser that we need to hit on? I mean, you mentioned injuries, and obviously we'll wait to see who they play. We'll find out tomorrow after Ohio State Michigan on national television. But it's going to be an interesting week leading up to another Big Ten title game.
Yeah, it will. And I see the point spread's already moving up to like 22 and a half. So they're showing faith in the Hawks. It went from 21 to 21 and a half up to 22 and a half. So I suspect it's going to be 24 by kickoff. So there's going to be no Iowa money out there. So that's fine. That's fine.
Worse than 21. Worse than 2021. Anything else for Tom, Don?
I do have one question, Tom.
Sure.
Was there any comment at all from Kirk? We know it was Kirk's decision to switch kickers. Did he solicit LeVar's recommendation, I wonder?
Yeah, he didn't really say specifically. I think he said they talked, so I'm sure that was kind of the decision that they both reached kind of unanimously, that we need to kind of move on from Drew, at least for today. And I'm sure they'll go right back to him next week, though. I'm sure he's going to be the kicker in Indianapolis, unless he's hurt.
I agree.
And he should be. I mean, you got to just keep going out there and keep getting after it. And he's a good kicker. He'll figure it out. He will.
And the only reason Marshall's here right now is because of the betting stuff with Aaron Blum.
That's Aaron Blum. Yeah. How about that? That's what the craziest part of the story is. That
I forgot about that.
They won a game because Aaron Blum bet on the Hawks.
I would think it'd be hard to find a situation similar to this anywhere, Tom, where a guy has never seen the field for his team all season. The last game of the season, he comes in on the road and kicks a game win. I just don't know that that's ever happened.
But it's sort of the only way that happens is with this Iowa football team.
Yep.
That's just the way this team has been built all year. just crazy things happening. Ethan Herkett with an interception, a defensive end playing zone intercepts a pass. I mean, where else does it happen?
Let's give a little credit to the play caller there too, because that defensive end that dropped back over the ball was supposed to do that. He was told to do that by the call, by the huddle call.
I thought Phil really blitzed a lot today. He was bringing Castro all the time, and it kind of bit him in the butt a couple times.
Well, one time we remember very well.
Yeah. One time, that time it did really badly, and that's just they had that was kind of like a quarters beater kind of play, right, Coach?
Well, they ended up, Deshaun was in single coverage against that number 2 receiver, and he was beaten to the post, and it was over. Had no help. Yeah. The bottom line, we hardly ever line up in the equivalent of 0. It wasn't 0, but we were comboing with our safeties on the inside receivers. So the inside receivers were doubled, but we had no help for the outside defenders or the slot defender. And Deshaun happened to be the perfect call for that situation.
Yep. Well, guys, I better get running here. I got to hit the road soon. So,
Tom, safe travels back home. Yep, safe travels all the way across the state of Iowa. You got the border-to-border trip back home.
I got a little drive ahead of me. So,
we'll
thanks,
talk to you
guys.
next week.
I'll talk to you this week.
Appreciate Tom Kakert. HawkeyeReport.com. Lots of coverage over there, and his guys will be covering the basketball tonight as well. Connor with the super chat. Thank you, Connor. Matt Rule postgame said he had a fake planned. Why would you fake a field goal from 58 yards into the wind?
It would have been 60 into the wind, because I remember where the spot was.
Thank you for the super chat, Connor. I don't understand that at all, and I also don't understand Matt Rule's philosophy on waste downs. And speaking of waste downs, I know we've hit this to straight in the head all year long, but I thought it was interesting. The color comment, or the analyst today. I don't even remember the guy's name, but he made a comment on 2nd and 1. Iowa ran for 2 yards on 2nd and 1, and he said, and I quote, "Seemed to me like Iowa had a free down to get a chunk play there." And what do? They run for 2 yards, Don, on 2nd and 1.
At that moment, I like that analyst a little bit more.
I agree.
What a perceptive man.
Colloidal, appreciate this. Reminding everybody, please hit that like button. We've got about 800 people watching on our 2 channels right now. Hit the like button. This was a while ago. He said 515. We're up to 800 approximately between the two channels. Hit the like button below. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Lots of coverage coming, not only the rest of the day through basketball, but into a championship game week as well. Kevin with the super chat. Thank you, Kevin. Fort Worth Hawkeye here. Great win. Great show. Thank you, Kevin. Question for Don. Where's your Dallas Cowboy hat? The sparkly one? I think Kevin's talking about the sparkly one from a week ago.
It was returned to the owner, the rightful owner.
All right, we're going to go a little bit quick on these next few calls, folks. So we'll go to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We'll start with Alex. Alex, welcome to the show.
Good evening, gentlemen. So obviously I'm going to go real quick. I crossed out a few things that I had noted. You already took away one of my notes about the announcers about the waist down when Iowa got a free play, got jumped offside, 2nd and 1, and they called it out. So, and then the last 2 things, I think Addison Estranga is kind of showing out that he could be another great tight end for Iowa. He needs to work a little better on the blocking. I know he had a couple missed blocks, but he had a couple good blocks this game as well. And then everyone's favorite topic is the targeting. I know the one on Jamari Harris got, they looked at that one, but there was a few more in the game. One against Caden Weegan on that kickoff where he got hit high, which is one of the definitions of targeting. So, Corey, you might remember, I know Dom would remember this, but I've heard some things of how to fix the targeting call. And one of the things I heard was if you remember way back in the day, there was 2 types of face mask penalties. There was the 5-yard and the 15-yard face mask penalty. Do you remember those type of penalties, Don?
I'm not sure. You mean
so there was 2 types of face masks.
I don't recall 2 different face mask penalties, honestly.
There was a 5-yard and a 15-yard. The 15-yard was the personal foul where you kind of rip the guy down. The 5-yard is like if you kind of like grabbed it but let go of it. Yeah. But then they did away with it and just everything's 15 yards because, with some of these targetings, I think just sometimes there's just a bang play like the one Iowa had against Minnesota, which they, overturned, after the game was over. It's one of those to where, either you keep the 15-yard penalty, but the player can still play in the game unless it's a flagrant. I mean, we have flagrant fouls in basketball. Why can't we have it in football as well? Where, if someone's really trying to, put a hell of a hit on somebody and try to, really hurt them, there's some things there that you can see. Granted, it's all subjective. My one thing too and I understand the targeting, but the last thing I'll say, and I'll get off so other people can get on, is that this is football. This is a contact sport. This is a violent sport. These players, when they sign up, they know what they're going to get into. And I'm all for protecting the players with all the equipment and everything like that, and trying to make sure they're not, players aren't headhunting, so to speak. But at some point, we just got to understand that this is a violent game. These things happen, and these players are not forced into playing. They sign up. And some of them are getting, now these college players are getting paid with NIL. It's like, okay, this is part of the sport. Again, there's certain things where they, like, if someone's really launching at somebody, like trying to hurt somebody, that's a different situation. But that's just my 2 cents on that.
You enforce it or you don't, Alex. And you can hold on. You can teach guys to not do what Jamari Harris did on that one play. It's as simple as that. You can play the game without those types of hits. That's why we have the targeting rule.
Need like that. You can train. Yeah, you can train like as a supervisor. You can train your people to do a process 100 times, and they do the process 200 times. 100 times they get it right, but there's 1 or 2 times where they screw it up. Yes. But so and with football being such a fast-paced sport, there is things like that will happen now. That's where I talked about having 2 different types of targeting. One where it's like, okay, it's still a 15-yard penalty. We want to eliminate it, but then it's like the player can still play in the game. Or if it's like, hey, you really try to like headhunt here, it's a 15-yard penalty and you're out of the game.
Difference between a flagrant 1 and a flagrant 2. I agree. We agree on that.
Yeah. So that's how I think we need to fix it, is that it needs to come down to like how, like the Jamar Harris, sure, 15-yard penalty, but he stays in the game. Now, if it's like where he really like launches with his feet and with the crown of the helmet into the player, then it's like, okay, he launched, which is one part of it, plus the crown of the helmet. Then you could say, okay, that's 2 of the 2 of the 3 rules that we have that is definition of targeting. Okay, since you broke 2 out of the 3 or met 2 of the 3 requirements for targeting, then you're gone. If it's just 1, then it's like, okay, hey, defensive player, crown of the helmet, or a launch. Again, it's a little subjective, and you kind of have to leave it up to the officials, which, as Iowa has seen, especially these last 2 games, sometimes the officials are sometimes not the best people to leave it in the hands of. So, but yeah, that was pretty much it. Like I said, I had a few more, but I was just good trying to make this real quick. So I know I tend to stay on here a little longer, but
you're fine. Appreciate you calling in, sir.
Yep, thank you.
All right, a couple of super chats here to get to. Thank you, Erica. Very disappointed that the cowboy hat was returned to the rightful owner. Any chance you may borrow it again, Coach? Go Hawks. And I won't read the other because I think I know what that stands for. But Don, you need to get a cowboy hat for yourself. I'm not going to wear mine tonight. If they somehow pull a shocker in Indy, I'll be running around the streets with that cowboy hat on. By the way, well, I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I am curious to see how many people who are in the chat are headed to Indy next week. Thank you for the super chat, Erica. Big Bolivar says, thanks for the best show available any place, Corey and Don. I'm sad it's a shorter one tonight. Go Hawks. Well, thank you, Big Bolivar. We're still going to be here for like 2+ hours in total. So, I mean, anyways, yeah, I know we're used to 3 to 4 hour shows, but thank you for the super chat, Big Bolivar. Do appreciate that. And Michael, also with the super chat. Thank you, Michael. Iowa averages less than 250 yards a game, and yet they're a stupid ref fair catch away from having a chance to go to the playoff. Yes. That speaks a lot to the entire team and what they've accomplished so far this year. That's very much true. And frankly, if Iowa somehow beats Ohio State or Michigan, Don, and they do so in impressive fashion, which won't happen. But if that somehow happened, Don, here's what I would urge the playoff committee to do. I would urge the playoff committee to go back and watch the end of that Minnesota game.
Right.
And I know that's going to be the Iowa homer in me. I would urge them to do that. Let's just focus on what happens tomorrow with Ohio State and Michigan and enjoy a 10-2 season before we get our hearts ripped out a week and a day from now. Let's go to our next caller. We've got Adam on hold. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, Corey, Don, happy belated Thanksgiving. Hope you all had a good one with the family and friends.
Absolutely.
Chad kind of jumped in on what I was thinking. First of all, hell of a call to put in Marshall Meter. First kick at Iowa. I was looking up his stats while I was on hold. Showed he was at Central Michigan, had a good career there, 2 or 3 years of kicking pretty consistently. So to hear that decision was made at halftime makes a little bit more sense, because I was going to ask Don, from a special teams decision, when you throw in the backup kicker, does that come from the special teams coach, or is that a final sign off from the head coach?
Final decision on the part of the head coach. But
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, if I were in that spot, I would for sure ask, give me some input before I decide. I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. Gutsy call.
LeVar's an expert at what he does.
No, I think he did a good job. I think, you look at blocking on those kicks. We had 2 kickoffs go out of bounds, 2 block kicks. They looked like low trajectory kicks. So I wouldn't completely blame the blocking on those field goal attempts.
Right.
These low trajectory kicks. So awesome to see that guy kick the game winner, whether it was a little bit over the crossbars or not.
Absolutely.
Here's an example that some people can relate to. Maybe it's a little bit like the putter that gets the yips. The golfer that can't sink a 3-foot putt. Because he missed one, and if you miss one, you're more likely to miss another and another and another, and so it's a little bit like that. So what do? You go to the practice green and you start making putts left and right, and that's exactly what Drew's going to do this week. I'm sure he's going to regain his confidence between now and next Saturday. I predict that's what will happen.
Nope, I think he needs it. Corey mentioned earlier about the $5 back nine. I gave up a 18-hole course, 158 tee time to watch this game today. So I must be crazy, or just a out-of-hand Hawkeye fan. But I gave up a 70 degrees Texas weather to watch the Hawkeyes come down to the last minute. So I think it was a good rain check on that round of golf. But secondly, I was thinking of, and this is minutia, but at the same point, seeing Brian Ferentz on the sideline wearing a black hoodie, black stocking cap, clearly trying to make a point as far as, whether it's a death march to the end or he's not going to support the university. But university that's given him, I don't know what he makes, $900,000 a year for 7 years. He's made close to probably $7 million before taxes. And, to kind of, it comes across to me as disrespectful for a man that's been supported by the university, giving him all the opportunities in the world to have that chance to become offensive coordinator, run game coordinator, offensive line coach. I think he's a good position coach. He, didn't meet expectations as offensive coordinator, but it also kind of feels like a slap in the face from a Hawkeye standpoint, a fan standpoint, to see him sitting on the not wearing any Hawkeye gear, not representing the university from a position that, I know in the NFL you wear the wrong type of socks, there's the fine. If you don't do any type of uniform, what the expectation standard is, that they fine you, whether it's $5,000, whatever it might be. From a college standpoint, is there any rules in effect that you need to wear team apparel, official merchandise from the university?
Well, if you're a Nike school, you're certainly not going to show up with Reebok gear, because you will get in trouble over that. I would hope that if it's been done, if it's a conscious decision by Brian, I hope that's not the case. It seems juvenile. It seems petty.
Well, it's very clear. I didn't address it 2 weeks ago, but it's very clear that since the announcement came down, he has wore nothing but black clothing with no obvious logos. That is clear now. So I can't imagine that it's been done unintentionally, Don. And I'm not saying I don't understand some of Brian's frustration for how some of that was handled from people, I think, even above Beth Getz. I understand there's two sides of this whole thing. I think a lot of us, most of us, probably all of us agree that Brian needed to move on after the year. Some people have argued that it should not have been done when it was done during the season. Why that occurred, again, who does the blame fall on? I agree with Adam to a large extent. It's unfortunate. He's a Hawkeye, right? And
Right.
I can imagine being in that position. I'd like to think that if I was in Brian's position, even though I'm talking out of turn here, if I was in Brian's position, that I would wear Hawkeye stuff and just bleed black and gold right down to the last second I'm in that office, regardless of what my superiors have decided to do.
Right.
We're talking about clothing here.
I'm muckraking. Clearly, I'm muckraking, but at the same point, he's cashed a check now for quite a bit for a large amount. Respect the university, respect the brand. Like I said, it's minutia, but at the same point, when he gets put on the cameras every 15 minutes with a dumb look on his face, trying to figure out what he should have done on that last third down. So it's just disappointing. The statement I was trying to make is, we understand you're upset. You didn't want to be fired. You were given plenty of opportunity to right the ship, and you didn't do it. And I think they still, any other offensive coordinator, as we've seen throughout the year, would, given their, pink slip in week after the game, and we've given you the opportunity to go to the Big Ten championship game, go to a, January 1st bowl. We're giving you every opportunity to kind of stick it in our face and say, hey, look, you made the wrong decision. And for him to kind of go out there every day in his blacked out attire, it just comes across disrespectful. But it's either here nor there, but it's a conversation point I wanted to bring up. And finally, seeing the defense blitz to the right side on that right tackle side, I don't know if it was the field side or the short side of the field, but you kind of saw it there consistently towards the end of the game. They were kind of taking away Chuba Purdy's opportunity to kind of roll out to the right and make a game plan. I know Phil got a lot of heat for that end of the first half, fake blitz from the kind of put him out of position to cover over the top. But I think you trust in Phil, as we say. 10 points against any team in the nation is a great game. He calls a great game, but I think some of those end of the game changes that he made were a big part in the victory. Putting the defensive lineman back in the zone, Herkett making the huge play. It's exciting. I think we're all excited to see what we can do. So that's kind of what I was going to talk about. It's funny that we can make such a quick hook on the kicker, and we're going to keep trotting out a quarterback, throwing 35% his first couple of games, and obviously not being strong with the ball. First video chat that I had with Corey was last talking about Petrus and his lack of moxie, and at one point he was so conservative with the ball. I think it was Wisconsin a couple years ago. He threw the ball out of bounds on a fourth down instead of forcing it in traffic. He threw it out of bounds. So that I think Kirk loves that. I think that's the type of quarterback that they want. But for them to keep trotting out Deacon Hill, who's turnover prone, had a couple missteps today. The goal line toss to the running back as he was falling, it's great. Nice little in-game change up when he gets stepped on, not moving his feet well. But it was just surprising we can make such a quick hook of a kick that quick, but we keep trotting out a quarterback that's prone to turnovers for 6 games now, and they act like we don't have an option on the bench when we saw Labus win the Kentucky game, and Marco Lainez shows some opportunity there to grow. But that was kind of the point I was making. We're a quick hook on the kicker, but we'll let a quarterback trot out their 6 games in a row and not really show much growth. So appreciate the time, guys. I know you have a short time today, but go Hawks.
Thank you, Adam. All good points, I think. Valid points from Adam and valid criticism.
Corey, let me make one other point regarding coaching gear. I flash back on something I always told the players, and it'll make sense when you think about it. I always told them, if you don't look like your teammates with how you're dressed, then you're wrong. We're a football team, and maybe you have an option of whether to wear black shoes or white shoes, depending on the playing surface. But in general, you don't show up with a pair of gold shoes just because you want to look different than all your teammates. I always used to explain to the players, I want you to look like everyone else on your team. And that's why we give you a unique jersey number, so your mom and dad can identify where you are out there on the field or on the bench, whatever the case might be. But there is an argument. Coaches always use that argument with players. You need to look like your teammates. This is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. So dress for success, which means wear the same playing gear that all your teammates are wearing. Don't show up with some kind of rogue outfit, because it's not. If you want to look different than everybody else, then be a tennis player or a golfer. Maybe they'll allow you to do it on a tennis court, but not in the football game. You need to look like your teammates.
Scott with the super chat. Thank you, Scott Jensen. Agree with the comments about the value of the show. Keep it up, Coach and Corey. Thank you, Scott. Do appreciate you being here, and do appreciate your super chat, your contribution. Brian with the Venmo donation. He says, sorry if this has been covered. Just got here, but I think the play calling was terrible. First and second down runs followed by a third and long pass multiple times. Drew had a bad game. Brian didn't give him any help in the least. You guys are the best, and go Hawks. Thank you, Brian. I could see that perspective. There were a lot of runs on first and second down. I thought there were a couple of really well-timed calls. For example, the little shovel pass. I think maybe our previous caller brought that up, Don. I thought that was obviously a nice play call. It was kind of an option shovel pass, right? Where he's holding the ball, at least giving the illusion that he could either run or hand off to the back to his right. He ends up shoveling it to a stringer for the first down. They were better.
There was much chance that Deacon was going to keep the ball.
No, I agree, but there was. I will give Iowa credit. They were a lot better in the first half in general on critical downs. They came into this game dead last in the Big Ten, critical down conversion, including third down conversion, and they were a lot better, closer to, I think, 50% or better in the first half. Yeah, fair point. And also Chris with the super chat. Thank you, Chris. He says, thanks for a great season. Don, since you know Kirk on a personal level, I am curious as to what your thoughts are on if Kirk could retire after this great year. What motivates Kirk to keep going?
You know, Kirk and I talk on a weekly basis, but it's always about analytics. It's never about what might happen at the end of the season. We haven't had any discussions like that. I do know that he and all kinds of other head coaches are frustrated with the transfer portal and NIL and a player's tendency nowadays to want to go somewhere else if things aren't going great. That's just a comment on young people today. I think they're more likely. You see this in high schools. You see a lot of students. I'm not just talking about athletes, but students. If they're a little bit unhappy at one school, they simply transfer to another school. In the old days, that really didn't happen so much. You know, you went to one school and you made it work. And I just hate that young people have a tendency to simply go somewhere else rather than confront a problem, address a problem, and take steps to solve it.
So, in answer to his question, Don, you think we're good to get Kirk back next year? Is there a chance?
Well, all I can really go by is what Kirk has already publicly stated. He said, I'm not ready to retire, and I hope no one's ready for me to retire, so I have every intention of coming back. He said that publicly, and I think we should take it for gospel, because Kirk's not in the business of trying to fool the general public.
Thank you for the super chat, Chris. Springtime. This is Alex. Says, I forgot to add that targeting should be enforced on the offense too. A lot of running backs lower their helmet when running. I don't have a problem with that. I know some people wouldn't like that, but I have no problem with that if we're talking about protecting players. Thank you, Alex, for the super chat. And Eric, appreciate the super chat. Eric, this is spot on. Brian is protesting. Protesting what? Keep his job despite his obvious shortcomings? Fair points. By the way, we talked about critical downs, Don. How about this? First half for Iowa, they were 6 of 12 on critical downs. Second half, you want to guess what their number was?
Maybe over?
1 for 7.
Yeah.
6 of 12 in the first half, 1 for 7 in the second half. Clear difference on critical downs. I don't know if you saw something different that Nebraska was doing on critical downs. It seemed like pass protection got a little bit worse as the game went on. I thought play calling was maybe a little bit better in the first half. But, again, got the job done, whether that be credit to Brian and Kirk or whoever. You got to give credit to Kirk, certainly. And the offense was able to get down the field, put Iowa in a position for that game-winning field goal by Meter. We're going to have to hit this real quick. We got about 15 minutes left on the show. Let's go to our next caller. We've got Dave on our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Dave, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Just having a good holiday in Minnesota.
Okay.
Just gonna make it quick. You know, I'm a diehard Gopher fan. But I'm gonna make it quick. So, if Kurt decides to retire, who would you like as a coach? There's one person I really think that Iowa should look at if Kurt decides to retire, and that is the Wyoming coach. The guy is doing really well at Wyoming, and he was the former coach of North Dakota State when North Dakota State getting to be a powerhouse in, you know, what was once called 1AA, now it's Bowl Subdivision. But what would you guys like?
Craig Bowl. Yeah, I would rather them make a pursuit for Bob Stoops in his lunar years. But Don, do you have a name out there if you had to make a coaching hire right now?
No, not really. You know, I can comment on certain coaches as being outstanding versus other coaches. I'm not so sure, but I don't have. If Bobby would agree to do it, and I would simply ask Bobby. I don't even know how old Bobby is now. If Bobby would say, "I'll give you 4 years. We'll get this thing in even better shape than what it's in right now, and then we'll turn it over to somebody else." And for that matter, I'll hire a couple of coordinators that'll be great head coaching candidates in 4 years. If Bobby would agree to do that, because I know how Bobby loves this school, I'd be inclined to hire somebody like Bobby Stoops, because Bobby knows how to be a head coach. And let's face it, he would have a lot of clout in terms of recruiting. And part of the reason that Hayden had success is because Hayden was a well-known coach even before he came to Iowa, and that helped us to recruit Texas for sure. And of course, he proved himself in coaching at Iowa too as an outstanding coach. So that gives you a chance to recruit better players. Players in general want to play for a guy that they can identify as a great coach. There's no doubt that Kirk's success has helped us to recruit better players, because young men like the idea of playing for a coach that they can really be proud of and be respectful to.
Thank you for the call, Dave. Appreciate that. We got to kind of cut that call short. We got to kind of cut all of our calls short, but appreciate you calling in. And that's going to be a fair topic if something does happen with the head coaching position. Jackson's on our Iowa Smokehouse call online. Jackson, welcome.
How's it going, gents?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Corey. And Coach, it's an honor meeting you for the first time ever.
Well, nice to talk to you, Jackson. Where are you from?
I'm from Alabama.
Alabama, good for you. I went to flight school years ago at Fort Rucker.
Oh, man, that's pretty cool.
You know where Fort Rucker is, don't you?
I don't think so. It's somewhere.
Down in Fort Dothan. It's in the southern part of the state.
Oh, wow. I'll have to go there one of these days. I will say it was a great game I saw today, and I did see that the Frost curse is still continuing at Nebraska. I mean, that interception, that was the turning point of the whole ball game right there.
We've just kind of come to expect it. And I saw our guy Mark Rogers tweet out after the game. This again, just to be expected in a game like this. Let me find Mark's tweet here, Don. He said, "Classic Iowa, classic Nebraska. 1 score wins, 1 score loses, or 1 score wins, 1 score losses." Fair. I mean, even under Matt Rule, so far they have been turnover prone. They lose close games, and Iowa eats that alive. That's why I said all the week, and I said today, even when it was 10-10, ask anybody who was texting me, I said, they're going to win this game. Iowa's winning this game. And I almost got a little nervous with that pick, but they won.
Well, I will say, Coach, what does Iowa need to get better at going into the Big Ten title game?
Wow.
Thanks for the call, Jackson. I got to cut you loose here, but that's a
We've
good
only
question.
got we've only got 8 days to solve it.
I know. What do they have to do to?
Well, from a kicking standpoint, we need to be sure that Drew Stevens returns to his old form. we need to continue to be as effective as we can in winning field position, which means here's another guy that needs to regain his old form. We haven't talked about it, but Torrey did not have a great day today. And I realize he's punting into the wind sometimes, but the ball wasn't carrying very well. And I know it's a cold day and all that, but it was an off day for Torrey too, except for Holding. Holding, he was more than worth his weight and go just with his ability to put a ball in position to be kicked.
But it is a cold day, not making excuses, but that could explain some of the struggles from Drew and Torrey. It was a cold day and that ball is rock hard.
True.
Michael Takahashi, thank you, Michael, for becoming a YouTube member. Yes, memberships are available. Click the little join button if you're interested. Appreciate you supporting the show that way, Michael, for being here. Eric wants to know if I'm going live after the women's game. Yes, after the men and the women are done, I'll be going live for a dual multi-purpose post-game show after that one. Wayfarer of the Wilderness, thank you for this. This season's post-game shows have been great. Bringing Tom in to join Coach and Corey is great. Win or lose here on out. It's been a memorable season. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. And let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line with Kyle. Kyle, welcome.
Good evening, guys.
What's up, Kyle?
Another typical Hawkeye win and another typical Cornhuskers loss.
You wouldn't have it any other way, right?
I know. First thing real quick before I get into Iowa. Matt Rule was 5-3 at one point in this season. He's now 5-6. They didn't hit bowl eligibility. They had 2 non-conference games that were basically freebie wins. Their other non-conference game was against Colorado, who turned out to be not very good. I know I'm not advocating for him to be gone or anything, but how do you evaluate that first year? Because I certainly thought they would be a little bit better, and I think moving forward they will be better too. But how do you evaluate his first year?
While you're thinking about it, Don, let me just say something. I have a lot of respect for Matt Rule based on what you've said, Don, based on how I know Kirk Ferentz views Matt Rule. I will say this. I am confounded by his viewpoint of waste downs as well. That's just one thing. I was confounded when he made his comments earlier in the year about waste downs, and he is in the minority. He and Brian are in the minority. I just want to make that clear. So I was a little bit surprised by that. I'm also surprised by a couple of different decisions, including a couple of gaffes, one of which cost him a timeout there, where they would have been to call a potential fake field goal from like 60 yards into the wind. I don't understand that. There's some things about Matt Rule that I don't quite get, but he's a breath of fresh air compared to Scott Frost. Don?
I agree. He's a man I can respect, and I'll say I didn't have nearly as much respect for Scott Frost.
I agree.
I think, what an incredible regular season with the 10 wins. I was looking through some numbers. So I didn't end up sending it to you, Corey, but I had a little spreadsheet I was working on about 2 weeks ago, right before the Rutgers game. And it was absolutely crazy to me because I put up the numbers of Iowa this year prior to the Rutgers game. The reason why I didn't send it to you was obviously the Rutgers game altered all the stats favorably, right? But I had a spreadsheet with all the numbers on it between it was comparing Iowa this year versus Northwestern's 1-11 offense the year prior. And you basically couldn't tell a difference between the two teams. And that Northwestern team had 1 win. This Iowa team has 10 wins. I think one of the other really confounding things, even if you compare, because Iowa's obviously been doing this for a little while now, the last really 3 years in a row have been bad offensively, and they've still managed to win in 7 games last year, but 10 games in 2021, 10 games this year so far. Iowa if you go back to 2021, they had an offense that the offense gained, I think 55 yards a game more, and they were plus 12 on turnovers, that team was. This Iowa team is minus 3 on turnovers this year. And even last year when they went 7-5, they were plus 6 or 7, I think, on turnovers. And maybe that minus 3 may be before the Nebraska game. I was looking at it on ESPN. So maybe it's minus 1 after today. But either way, very uncharacteristic of them to not only lose the turnover battle, but also to have so much winning. Really, a season should be 11-1 when they're minus on the turnovers. Does that what's your reaction to that stat?
Pretty incredible. I think pretty incredible. They've managed to overcome that.
because they average even less yards than they did last year, and they're 10 turnovers worse basically than last year, almost 1 turnover a game worse.
Let me talk about turnover margin as it relates to this game. Here's what you're not aware of probably, and I only became aware of it after I turned in the analytics. This much I did know. All 5 teams that had beaten Nebraska in conference play, all 5 had won on turnover margin. The unusual aspect of that, when I looked at all 8 games, the other 3 teams that lost to Nebraska also won on turnover margin. Here's what will surprise you, though, Kyle. Maybe a little bit will surprise you. There were 5 of those 8 games where, believe it or not, the opponent was only +1. They won on turnovers, but by the smallest possible margin. 3 of those 5 teams actually lost to Nebraska, even though they were +1.
Yeah.
The other 2 won, and obviously the other 3 teams also won. They ended up 5-3, right? I'm sorry, 3-5.
3-5, and then 5-7.
5 teams beat them. My point is, 8 teams beat them on turnovers. But here's the difference, and I made sure that the coaches understood this. I said being +1 is not enough. You need to have the mindset. We need to win on at least +2. Need to be at least +2 in the game to win, because +1 this year, Nebraska in those 5 games, when they were only -1 as a football team, they actually won the game. They won 3 out of 5 games when the opponent was +1. So my message to the coaching staff was +1 is not good enough. You need to be +2 or better. And isn't it ironic, Corey, that we were in fact +2? That was the final margin.
And there were a lot of plays in this game. I thought
right.
Plays,
+1 doesn't get it done. You get better.
Yeah, I thought there could have been 7 or 8 turnovers in this game. I mean, Chubba Purdy just blatantly dropped the ball on the one play, and Iowa had 4 or 5 chances at it before the Nebraska player picked it up.
You know what's interesting to me about Chubba is he said he doesn't know how to carry a football even. He's running around waving it around like it's a Christmas ornament or something in his hands.
He runs even when he was scrambling, like he never really, to me, tucked the ball and turned into a runner. He held the ball with 2 hands like he was still going to throw
ball
it.
security.
Yeah.
And in that regard, here's how I'd look at it. In that regard, I blame the coach. You know, the coach got to change that. It didn't change yet, so that should be on the coach. You got to do a better job of coaching him, because that's no way to carry a football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kyle, I gotta let you slide. Hopefully you're calling later, but we got basketball ahead. So
okay, no problem.
Sounds good, sir. Thank you.
Talk soon.
All right, couple things. I've had a few in the chat. I saw Erica was on here. She just jumped off. So we're going to look at our I'm going to kind of guide this, Don, because I've got about 5 minutes before I've got to get this basketball game on. Rappers and Rabbis, question for Coach Don. How do you prepare for a team that you know is a lot better than you? Is it different than business as usual? Don, give me a 1-sentence answer to that.
1-sentence answer? Prepare to throw the kitchen sink at him.
It's a good one. I love Mitch in the chat. He says, Brian Ferentz should wear Iowa State clothing with how you treated him. Oh. Kirk should leave, and so should this commentator. I think he's talking about me. Yes, they should be absolutely outraged. Outraged, Mitch. I'm just as outraged as you are. All right. Jack in the chat. Coach, what would you do if you were Iowa's OC to beat Michigan, Ohio State? I think we just answered that. Throw the kitchen sink. Rick, I love this comment here. Heard a rumor from the Cornhuskers that they're going to the Family Bowl tonight for pizza and loads of fun. I love it. Rex says, I've not been so freaked out by an Iowa football game. They did nothing in the second half. Who is this new punter? Did Stevens get benched? Well, first of all, Rex, there was no new punter. It was still Torrey Taylor. Stevens did get benched, and it was Marshall Meter, the transfer from Central Michigan, that came in late. Matt, question. I noticed on both block kicks, Nebraska had 7 guys on the line on one side of the ball. Is that legal in college? It is not in the NFL.
I think it's, for what I know, it's perfectly legal.
Charles says, what's up with Caleb Brown? I see Jeremy. What's with Caleb Brown's injury? Sounds like potentially he'll be back next week. He was on the field late. today. BJ says, it's funny that Iowa fans complain about not being aggressive, and then when we are aggressive, you complain. Well, first of all, BJ, it's all about time and score, all right? 3rd and long with Deacon Hill at quarterback and on the minus side of the field is not a time, in my opinion, to be aggressive when you've got overtime looming, and that almost cost them. So it's not just a matter of are you aggressive or are you not. That's what's so one of the big problems with society, Don, is everything is so black and white. And I'm not just talking about BJ, but everything is black and white. You can't have it both. There's no balance. We always talk about balance. There's no balance. MC says, how can we watch the Iowa women's game? It's on flowhoops.com. You got to spend like $30, but I'm probably going to do it because I do a post-game show. Christopher says, any predictions on the score for the Big Ten championship game? I will be coming out with that later in the week after I see who wins the game tomorrow. Jet Pilot, what are the opinions on the timekeeper not starting the clock? A blunder that I would think could have been corrected, but it was not done.
Well, I blame the officials. There's one official for sure that should have been able to detect the fact that the clock had not started. And he should be held accountable for not doing his job as well as he needs to.
Williams says, Coach, should Iowa approach the championship game with business as usual approach on offense or be as unpredictable as ever and see what happens?
We need to be more unpredictable than ever.
Yeah, I agree. Cyhawk C Money, Don, is Michigan prone to exhaustion or fatigue from this constant barrage of controversy?
I don't think so. I think it's their rally cry. I think they'll use it all the way through, however many games they end up getting to play.
And Erica, final super chat of the evening. How could Brian dare not wear Iowa gear? I mean, there's nothing else to worry about, right? There's a little bit of cynicism, sarcasm, I think, there from Erica. Erica, thank you. And again, Iowa defeating Nebraska here 13-10. Want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. Thank you, Brad, for being with us throughout the year, and support the show by supporting our sponsors. Call Brad for a free insurance quote. Rates have never been this low on auto insurance. Give Brad a call at 515-256-6480 or online at bradvanmeter.com. You can also visit him in person at 4229 Fleur Drive in Des Moines. Plus, Iowa Smokehouse, tasting is believing with their awesome beef sticks, their jerky, their steak bites. You'll never need to look anywhere else for game day and snacking needs. Use the code Hawkeyes at iowasmokehouse.com for 15% off your order. You'll get free shipping, on $50 orders. Iowa Smokehouse, tasting is believing. Also want to thank RTI Threads. Been talking about them all season. I've got the Cooper DeJean CD3 logo apparel on this evening. Get yours right now at cd3lacesup.com. But how about Carson Shire with a big game on special teams today? And he is part of the future at linebacker. Aaron Graves had a big game. Aiden Hall, Zach Lutmer are in the wings. View all of RTI Threads apparel and merch line at rtithreads.com. That's rtithreads.com. And speaking of RTI Threads, our player of the game is Marshall Meter. Who would have expected the player of the game would be Marshall Meter? At a game-winning field goal as time expires, it's hard not to name him our RTI Threads player of the game. And again, thank you to RTI Threads. We've got Iowa women's basketball and Iowa men's basketball. Iowa Seton Hall. This says USC, but it's actually, let's correct that so everybody's aware. It's actually Seton Hall because USC did beat Seton Hall. The men looking to bounce back today after a rough showing yesterday against Oklahoma. That game about to tip off on Fox. And then at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, it's the women taking on Purdue Fort Wayne in their holiday week tournament. That game will be shown exclusively on Flow Hoops. Don, the Hawks are 10-2. We're going to be talking about a trip to the championship game. I'm sure you and I will probably try to get together for some sort of a preview prior to Indianapolis. But thank you for being here throughout another really enjoyable regular season. I always enjoy the few hours we get to talk on Saturdays, and we'll look forward to a couple more.
I'll do the same, Kirk. It's always a pleasure, Corey.
All right, folks, for Coach Don Patterson and Tom Kakert of HawkeyeReport.com, I'm Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Join me in a little bit following the men and the women basketball postgame coming up later this evening. And, of course, lots of football coverage down the road as well. We'll talk to you soon.